Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As you will see today, I'm hoping you can get a perspective from us around the artificial intelligence insights. And joining me again, bringing the band back together, is Joe Morris, who's the VP of Research at Center of Digital Government, and Mike Hussey, the CIO of the state of Utah. And they're going to take us through sort of the evolution of how AI has changed and has impacted government over the last year, but specifically around the last few months as the pandemic has helped and frankly accelerated many things for us in terms of how AI adoption is occurring. So Joe, could you please then take us through some of the findings and what you did around some of these interviews that you conducted over the last several months to help us understand how AI is evolving, being adopted, and how it's infusing itself into how the government supports citizens.
Sure, David, it'd be my pleasure. Our team here at the Center for Digital Government conducted 20 interviews with state CIOs and line of business leaders over the last month and a half. And really on the topic of artificial intelligence adoption, wanted to understand what impact, if any, COVID-19 was having on those plans and revisit the work that we did jointly a year ago to see kind of how the needle has moved. And frankly, you're right. I mean, COVID-19 certainly has had an impact in accelerating the adoption of artificial intelligence. And I'd say looking at the data in aggregate, there's a lot more optimism around artificial intelligence. There's a lot more adoption around artificial intelligence. And the conversation's also evolved into deeper adoption. A lot more talk this year around robotic process automation, modernizing workflows to meet the new normal. With most of the government workforce across the country in some form of remote work, there's a lot of workflows that need to be modernized, and people are looking at how work is being done differently. And I think it's presented an opportunity for artificial intelligence. And you'll see as we start talking today, I believe that right now is the moment for artificial intelligence adoption across state government.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear what Mike has been doing as well. I know he's been leading the charge in the past, and I know he's got some other insights for us as well. So, Joe, start us off with some of your findings.
Yeah, I mean, so we were just talking about how the pandemic has accelerated AI adoption. A couple of quotes that kind of colored the interviews, and these are pretty consistent. Like every other state during the pandemic, we went 0 to 60 with chatbots. If you recall the study last year, we saw a pretty strong adoption with chatbots, but it's really accelerated with COVID-19, with the amount of citizen interaction that governments are experiencing with individuals going to the state website, trying to find public health data, trying to find a human service, trying to gather information about what the latest announcement from the governor is, has caused a rise in citizen requests that are being now handled in large part by chatbots. But also, like I was mentioning earlier with robotic process automation, the quote here kind of summed it up perfectly for me. It's more real today than it has ever been in government. And I think that points to the changing nature of work and how the role of government work may change with thanks to technologies like RPA and chatbots and many others.
So, Mike, I'd love to, you've been in the forefront of AI adoption ahead of the pandemic. How have the attitudes changed, and how have you managed that acceleration of AI adoption for citizens and the agencies that you serve?
Well, in my scientific study, which is almost as scientific as Joe Morris and the Center for Digital Government, I ask my wife and daughter all the time, what's their perception of AI and what the state is doing? And, it's interesting because I think when we had our first tour of NASCIO with this team, I always thought about the Hollywood perception and artificial intelligence and whatnot. And interestingly, as we since then we've done a lot of work. We had a Center for Excellence that is really trying to spread the word for AI and possible use cases of AI in state government. And so I asked my wife and daughter again, hey, what's your perception of AI? Completely different. So almost as scientific as Joe's study, but it's really like, hey, these chatbots are actually AI driven, and they start to get a better understanding and idea of really what AI means. It's not that Hollywood scary thing. And it's just doing some of the work that sometimes used to be offloaded to a human. Well, interestingly, we're starting to see a lot more now. Our chatbots are receiving just a ton of work right now. They're going through many things. I think I mentioned this one other time, and our chatbot Porter is what he's called. When people come to the state, he'll first engage if you like, and he's doing all sorts of things, and he is perceived as so real that somebody started asking him for marriage counseling advice. And so we're starting to see that even the public, I think, is warming up to the idea. I'm sure it was just in fun that people were having fun with our chatbot, but we're starting to see that the public is warming up to the idea, and that is certainly a lot of that work, that a lot of that repetitive work, a lot of that just directing traffic can be handled by AI. And I think that the public is warming up to that. And so we're starting to see moving the needle, as Joe talked about, further all the time. And as a matter of fact, we're starting to see that adoption increase, and people are now putting the same chatbot on their websites, whereas before it was just kind of a smattering of it here and there. But you can start to see that, yeah, that state agencies are warming up to the idea, the citizenry is warming up to the idea, and I think that pretty soon you'll see this just pervasive through state government.
That's great, Mike. And actually, I mean, as you think about millennials and the next generation of citizens coming in, chat's one way, text and voice is another, but you're also getting some insights into how what's important to citizens. And as you are able to record all of that and be able to analyze that a little bit more, just the fact that you digitize that interaction through AI gives you even more insights as to what's important to your citizens. So, yeah. Joe, this is great, and I think it's great also that agencies are finally realizing, hey, maybe this is something that we can do to improve the way we serve our mission to our citizens. So I mean, I think it's great. So, Joe, did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I think to Mike's point, people are warming up. You can see some of the figures just at the bottom of this slide, right, from a couple of the interviews, that these weren't, by themselves, but 2.5 million calls answered by chatbots over the course of a month. You had many people rolling out numerous chatbots that are handling high volumes of calls right now. And I think it points to the fact that we're more comfortable as residents engaging with chatbots. We're also trying to still seek that quicker point of satisfaction to get a resolution. And if a chatbot can do that, and it can prevent me from having to wait on the phone for 3-4 hours, then more to it. And I think that's what you're seeing from residents. And that's I think another indication of how far the needle's moved just in a 12-month period. I think that this moment in time where we need our government more than ever, technology is rising to the challenge.
That's great. I'm glad that consistency is happening, and as a user myself, I think it's great that you can get much more insights, perhaps in some cases, as you use these AI methods. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about the future use. Right, they've learned quite a bit from using it today, and perhaps that's gotten some new adoption and other interests. What did you find around the future use?
Yeah, I think this was interesting too. I think if I go back again to our study a year ago, there was a lot of talk in that study about concerns over AI. This kind of standard concerns that you still see in this research, but privacy concerns. What does it mean to the workforce? Is it going to replace jobs? All of those concerns kind of come out when you start talking about what does AI really mean, right? The real impact of it. But this year, what I saw change was, again, coming back to the workforce and the opportunity for it to be a force multiplier. The opportunity to maybe remove some of those rote tasks and create more rewarding jobs. So every time we talked about what a challenge could be, the interviewees really came back with saying, this is really going to allow us to deliver additional services, potentially lower our costs. We're never going to take the human out of things like human services, but we're going to be able to remove mundane tasks from them. We're going to create a more rewarding job for them, and a job that's more engaged. We always talk about the government experience, the experience that you have as a resident or a business owner with your government. The idea for those people that are at the front lines to engage with you more at a more personal level, because some of that workload has been removed because of technologies like AI.
Yeah, I mean, and as you think about all the state and local municipality budgets, right? They've been affected by these reduced revenues, and AI is not only solving a near-term problem of capacity and managing, but it's also looking to provide an opportunity for a cost reduction, but at the same time an enhanced level of service. And as you said, Joe, keeping the human still touching with some aid of AI. So Mike,
the only other thing I'd add is that, again, the pandemic impact came through here too, right? Everyone's looking for more virtual ways to engage with the customer. Whether those are digital services, online services, AI, curbside service, if you will, looking for ways to still comply with the various health maybe mandates that may exist in their jurisdiction, but also understand that mechanisms that were once seen as convenient are now a necessity, and that's pushed for a new realm of online services to come through in digital government.
Actually, that's a great segue, Joe, because as I think about this, Mike, maybe as you continue the AI journey that you've been through now for more than a year, what areas are you prioritizing for future near-term adoption? Say, for example, the next 3 months, and why? And how do you plan to use either COVID-19 funding for that, or perhaps savings in the future to help you move that agenda forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and kind of based on this conversation, we're starting to see that agencies are actually putting into their IT plan now use cases for AI, and so you can see that the agencies are doing this, and over the short term, I can see some things that we will probably need to shore up. For instance, most of our employees are teleworking, and so you're starting to see in that brings additional challenges to states where you might be needing to secure an endpoint that's outside of your firewall, outside of your protections that you normally have. How do you gather data to make sure that endpoint is still secure and protected? And so we aggregate a lot of data. We use some machine learning to understand how what are the bad actors doing? How do we shore up our defenses? And I think that's really starting to pay a lot of dividends. As you talk about, you're trying to do more with less. Certainly, we're blocking about 2.3 billion attempts a day. And if we can learn about what those bad actors are doing, we can shore up our defenses at the same time. And so machine learning is helping with that. I'm going to mention something that maybe I have to be careful. Elections. Election season is upon us. And that's another thing that we are using AI to determine what does the landscape look like? What are the bad actors doing? What's the misinformation campaigns going on that will really try to thwart what's a real and an accurate election? And so we want to make sure that we are doing the right things. And so I see over the course of the next few months that's probably where we will focus our efforts. But again, like I said at the beginning, we're seeing IT plans that are coming in now that are actually forecasting uses of AI across all the agency. Public safety is looking at it, how they might use it. Our DOT is looking at it. It's just been very refreshing again to be catapulted into this pandemic and have a silver lining, and that is the use cases for AI that come out of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Mike. And I remember from our panel last year, right, that you mentioned security and AI was a big piece of your implementation, and talked about video and some other things that you were using. As you also mentioned elections, I know at least what we've seen in one state, they've extended intents of being able to take chatbots to provide information. People are wondering where to vote, where to drop off their ballots, how to actually, what safe protocols they need to follow, right? And a lot of that is fairly routine information, but important for citizens that they want to look at. I also think it's great and promising that, again, as agencies start thinking about what they can do, that they're actually now baking this in, and I hope that at some point, Joe, I'd like you to comment on this a little bit. Where have you started to see the adoption on the process side of this, not on the response and static? We've seen it at least in one state where they're looking at their unemployment insurance processes and considering, can I provide some robotic process automation to retrieve data and reduce times from 20 minutes to serve a citizen to down to 2, as an example, based on the information that's there. But Joe, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, Mike's point about it being baked into a lot more came out in the interview process as well. There was a lot of discussion about potential procurements coming out. The next RFP will have AI baked into it. And part of that's the lessons learned over the last 6 or so months, right? And how the work process has changed, and that's going to impact how government procures and ultimately what they procure. But to your point, Dave, and to your question about what's on the horizon beyond that, I think the next slide addresses that.
Let's jump to that, please. Yeah.
we saw that in some of the agencies, right? And it starts first and foremost with Health and Human Services. You hit unemployment. We saw a lot of discussion through the interviews around what happened in the UI space. Obviously, with the uptick in unemployment over the last couple of months, there was high call volumes. There was contact centers that became overwhelmed, and that was an opportunity for AI and chatbots and some of the technologies that we've discussed so far today to be implemented. As you look at where that's going to go next, we're starting to see discussion in Medicaid and areas like food stamps, other programs that may experience those same elevated caseloads. Outside of that, then you get back into just what I would consider like the general government workforce, and that's all of that process automation to modernize those back-end workflows that you don't touch maybe daily, but that worker touched, someone that moved that whether that's an eligibility application, that piece of paper to the next workstation, they're not there in person anymore. So that work process has to be adjusted. Contact centers came up over a number of the interviews as well for the reasons I just discussed. But again, elevated phone calls coming in, information requests, contact requests around government services. So some of that can be offloaded as well. So those are just some of the areas that we saw. But there was a really wise CIO that we spoke to, who may be joining us on this session here today, who said that in government, it's a target-rich environment right now for AI. Yeah. And I think that when Mike talked about what's happening in Utah, it's what we're seeing across the nation right now, is a greater exploration of where it can be used beyond where it's being used today.
Yeah, it's a great comment, and Mike, I'll pull you in here in a second to the call center and chatbot has been such a quick hit and benefit that now people are starting to try to figure out across agencies how they can use it, not just for what they've done for immediate citizen contact, but perhaps a number of other sources of information or processes around it. So, Mike, maybe you can help us understand a little bit, as your agency customers adopt this for AI into their activities, how have you helped them see the benefits or understand those benefits and to serving the citizens? What, maybe some examples that you may have.
And Joe brought up many of those just now, where we're starting to see what might we do. We've had some budget cuts in the states, and so what might we do to become more efficient? And so what you bring things forward like an RPA that says, hey, we have this repetitive task or this very labor-intensive task of going through logs or going through bills or invoices. And what can you do to apply an RPA to make things more efficient for state government? And so you start in our Center of Excellence, we bring these ideas out and say, all right, agencies, these are some of the ideas that we have, or these are some of the emerging technologies in AI that you might be able to adopt. And I think that many of those ideas go to the agencies, and then, like Joe was saying, they start to get baked into just the routine process of budgets and going after these technologies. And we're starting to see that agencies, are looking at the ROI that can come from AI. And it seems like we're starting to see more and more use cases. I think, as Joe was talking about some of the things that you see here, we're looking at it even in our Department of Agriculture, of all places, where we have a log of brands, all the branding for cattle and livestock. We're out here in the West, giddy up. we want to make sure that the brands are unique enough that they can identify the cattle or whatever. If some get lost, we close down a canyon road because there's a major livestock movement twice a year. They just run them up the freeway, so the highway patrol closes down the road. They run the cattle up, and and if they get stray and lost, we use machine learning and AI to identify our brands. And so we have an innovation fund that we've set up. And this is one of the things that came out of that was image recognition. And all of a sudden we have these FTEs. We have about 16,000 brands registered in the state. And can you imagine the FTEs that were required to monitor all of those brands and to see if a new brand comes in, if it's different enough from another one. And so now we just use some image recognition technology. If a cattle gets lost on its way up, something, you know, they get stray, we can just take a picture of the brand, run it through our AI engine, and we can now see who's the owner of this some of this cattle. So in any case, we're seeing it across the board in places that you didn't expect. As Joe was talking about, some of these are the big wins, but we're also seeing it in some of the places that you least expect to see it. And so we're in our agricultural departments, our, like I said, public safety, Department of Workforce Services, where you're starting to apply RPAs. It's going to be pervasive, and I did say, yeah, this is a target-rich environment right now. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of need for efficiencies, and AI is going to bring those through to state government.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I also recall that you mentioned the COE was a key to success for you guys, that Center of Excellence, to be able to bring the ideas together and then share them back out to the agencies. And target rich for sure, because you know, I don't know how many states will have a cattle problem, but I think you know, some of them could benefit from using an analogy in that space.
Yeah, and I think
Go ahead, Joe.
if you look at that problem it's solving, is a problem that government's becoming more aware of. We talk at the beginning about the COVID-19 impact in terms of acceleration of chatbots as one example. But we also saw a massive injection of funds that hit state and local government, right, through the CARES Act. Well, as those funds either expire or dry up, it does create a funding cliff, and we're talking about potentially, you know, belt tightening measures, budget reductions that we're seeing at both the state and local level, and new ways that we need to optimize and drive down some of those costs. So that thread also came through in the interview process about what Mike just talked about, is how do we, you know, make better use of what we've got, because maybe we are in the phase of doing more with less, but there are opportunities to use technology to extend, again, it can be a force multiplier here.
No, that's great, Joe. I mean, if you think about cost reduction, resiliency, and improving efficiency of services to citizens, I mean, all this is there. So maybe we can talk about just some of the benefits that we see that and that you found were being highlighted during the process of your interviews.
Yeah, sure. I mean, more personalized service, again, coming back to that government experience. One of the threads around workforce in the research was around just that. How do we free up our human staff to deliver more personalized service? We can do some of that through chatbots and speed up the process, Dave, to your point, maybe take it from 15 minutes down to 2. But at the same time, areas where a personal touch is needed, how do we free up the staff to do that, to have a bigger impact? We just talked about belt tightening and budget changes. How do we get a more efficient government? How do we drive down those costs? How do we make better use of the resources that we have? And that's where RPA came up over and over again through the interview process. What excited me about the interviews this year was a lot of talk about more rewarding work. We weren't talking about AI from a fear context. We were talking about it, how it can create a more rewarding job for those that are in public service now, and maybe make it a more attractive place for those that are looking for their next job to come into government because of the possibilities that may be there to serve. So a lot of it came back again to service. More virtual engagement, of course, that is that pandemic impact. We were looking for ways to engage people, maybe even if that's not face-to-face, because that, for a significant portion of for the governments that we talk to, is still, you know, in effect because of the pandemic. And there may be people that, even as the pandemic subsides, still are going to look for those more of a virtual engagement point than wanting to wait in line again. So social distancing is having an impact on technology adoption. And then, of course, augmenting the workforce. So that's where we come back again to that thread that we talked about earlier about being that force multiplier. How do we focus our staff on those higher value tasks where human intervention is needed the most? And you saw that even with what Mike identified, there's still a point of human intervention. We saw that through the interviews as well. Maybe instead of having to manually check thousands of documents, the ones that need to be checked the most are still viewed by that individual, and they're getting a better use of their time, and the government is getting, you know, hopefully in more improved costs, and again, a more efficient government. So that's what we saw in terms of some of the benefits.
That's great. And Mike, you know, as you think about some of these benefits in your state, kind of what's the role that you have played to help either in emphasizing these or getting more adoption to help agencies and your peers understand the benefits?
Yeah, well, I always believe that success breeds success. And so when we start to talk about the successes that we're having with AI and very specific applications, and talk about it in our COE and talk about, hey, might be an application of this use of AI here or there, others get excited about it. And so I would say cheerleader might be one of those that probably best identifies at least my current role, bringing awareness of the technology and promoting it with those agencies. And so I think as much as I don't know if I can fit into my costume anymore, I'd still say cheerleader is probably one of my roles that I'm out there out at the front trying to say, hey, this is a great use case. As Joe talked about some of these benefits, we are certainly seeing those in the state of Utah, even with some of these minor things that we've done. Certainly more rewarding work, better, more efficient government, more efficient in our time and to process claims and whatnot. And so as you start to see these, I can be out in front cheerleading the effort and kind of telling the story about success breeding other success. And so I think what we'll see down the road is a higher adoption across the spectrum, across all state agencies, as that Hollywood-esque kind of a perception of AI diminishes, and people are starting to see really what some of those use cases can be in state government and start to adopt them. I think that's where I can cheerlead and help be out at the front of this.
Oh, that's great. No, we look forward to seeing you doing a little bit of cheerleading too. So,
Okay.
so Joe, any as we get to the near the close here, any final thoughts on just what you found and where we are?
No, I think Mike hit the nail on the head. I think across the CIOs that we spoke to, the concept of being the cheerleader, being the champion, being the enabler, absolutely came up, and lastly, being the communicator. Being the communicator of where these successful pilots may be, where the successful implementations may be, because there are the big bang ones that get attention, like unemployment insurance and fraud, waste, and abuse, and the things. But it's also being deployed in other areas, to Mike's point, where it isn't getting seen as much, but it's having that same impact. It's making people more effective, driving those results. I think looking at the study as a whole and the interviews, to me, what struck me this year compared to last year was the optimism. Look, the last 6 months have been challenging. I think CIOs across the country feel like Stretch Armstrong in that they're being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and I'm sure those at the front lines feel the same way. So the opportunity to take advantage of technologies like robotic process automation and chatbots to give them a little bit of relief and to deliver better services, I walked away from this project feeling, wow, we're on the beginning point of something really impactful here, and the best is yet to come.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same thing even as in IBM and how much adoption is there. Mike, any final closing thoughts from you in the last minute or so?
No, we're excited about the future too. We're starting to see that places we never dreamed that we might apply AI are starting to come to the forefront, and likely, again, if there's a silver lining in this pandemic, it's really because we've had to really think outside the box and think about the art of the possible, really applying these things, because like I said, we've had these budget cuts. We're looking to be more efficient, and what is that technology need or that technology hammer that can fix some of these things, and many of that does rest with AI. So we're excited about the future, about the emerging technologies that are coming out and the things that we're seeing, and partners out in the industry that are making it easier for us to adopt those. So it's really exciting to see where we are today, and even in the near future, as we're talking about even just a short 3 months away, what we might do. And so we're excited about that. And if my crystal ball said anything, it's that the future looks very bright.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I hope you those watching get a sense of that optimism that Joe and Mike are talking about, because it really is a new opportunity to address so many of those benefits and to help government provide better services to citizens. So let me close with today and say thank you to both of you, Joe and Mike. Thank you for your thoughts and insights. I think it's great. As this has been a recording, I do want to give you a heads up that later today, we will have 2 Q&A sessions where we'll be able to have more of a conversation, and at 1:30 to 2 p.m. Eastern, and again from 2:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern. So thanks again for everybody's attention, and hopefully this was very helpful for you. Look forward to talking to you later. Take care.
Thanks.